Hey, real quick, before we start this episode of Turek Books, LA, Santa Barbara, I'm doing my one-man poetry performance on January 29th in LA at the Elysian Theater, and then a couple nights later at the Whale House in Santa Barbara, which is this architectural gem with a swimming pool that you can swim in, live jazz, barbecue. It's going to be pretty cool. Check out my website, joshuaturek.com, for tickets, and keep an eye out for my poetry workshops that I've been doing on Zoom. Those are a lot of fun. And I got another poetry book coming out in a month or two, so I'm excited about that. Anyway, let's get to the episode and get to the books. All right.
Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Turek Books. I'm so glad to have you here today. I'm live but remote from Bad Animal Bookstore in Santa Cruz, California, my favorite bookstore in Santa Cruz, California. Our guest today, she's a writer, she's my friend, she has a new book coming out. Lauren Lavin, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Very, very excited to be talking to you in Santa Cruz too, because I never lived there, but I spent a lot of my early 20s like playing music there and partying responsibly there, and it was just a really formative place for me. So I was excited to hear that you're there all of a sudden.
Oh, where did you play music? Like the Catalyst?
No, a lot of like queer crust punk co-ops that were like multiple houses connected and stuff like that.
Yeah, they exist. I haven't been invited into any of those communities yet, and I don't know if I will, but I'm glad that they're there because the rest of Santa Cruz is pretty boring. You're up in Seattle. When does your book come out?
February 3rd.
Excellent. And you and I, we've been friends since Twitter was called Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally hung out up in Seattle a couple years ago. And now it's sort of a tradition if I'm up in Seattle for us to hang out with our friend Mary. And I'm happy to get you on the podcast and hear about your literature life. I'm curious what you're reading or what you brought today.
Oh, yeah. You told me there was like a show and tell kind of component. And I spent a couple different days like adjusting and readjusting the stack I wanted to bring. And even like minutes before we got on today, I went and grabbed a different couple books too. But I have some books that I have read. I brought a couple that were like formative to me in my teens also. And then a couple books I'm like making my way through still and really enjoying and just want to shout out.
Awesome. Yeah.
So where do I begin?
Yeah, it's wherever you want to begin. And also, your new book is called The Third Beat. So I just had to drop that at the top of the episode.
Yes, I have my book is a short essay collection or a slim volume. It's under 100 pages, perfect for the attention-addled, brain-rotted like myself. And it comes out February 3rd from Autofocus Books. I'm underselling it. Don't worry. It's also quite dense of an experience, even at under 100 pages. But I really, really love working with autofocus. And I was like, that is the first and only place I sent the manuscript to. And I also knew it wasn't long enough for them technically yet at the time that I sent it. But I was just so excited for the opportunity that I shot my shot. And so I really want to shout out Michael Wheaton because he was such an incredible editor to work with. And he was like, I agree with you that there's something here, even though it's not done yet. And I would like to help you finish that up. And so, which is like my dream. It's how I always wanted to write a book. And I thought, oh, that's impossible. That's not how publishing happens. You have to have it done first. And now I'm spoiled and that's the only way I want to write books. So if anybody out there is listening and interested in some unfinished book ideas I have, please hit me up. Okay.
All right.
So speaking of autofocus, Emily Costa is one of my favorite writers of all time. This is her first book that she published with autofocus called Until It Feels Right. She has a more recent book that I would be showing off, except that I gave my copy to somebody else to read. which is a book of short stories called Girl on Girl that came out with Rejection Letters a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. Also, shout out DT Robbins and Rejection Letters, another really great, just online publisher, physical book publisher. They are putting out really, really rad work. I could also quickly shout out another book of theirs by Kevin Carney called Freelance that I just read that I was a big fan of. Anyway, here's the thing about Until It Feels Right. It is written as it's like a cognitive behavioral therapy diary, and the writing, like the keeping of the diary, is like an exposure therapy for OCD, in the vein of a kind of OCD treatment. And so what you're reading is not just a diary or a recollection of experiences, but it is I don't want to say forced, but it's like a recollection that is happening, and you're aware while you're reading it that the writer is talking about and struggling with the act of making it happen, as well as the act of recollecting, in a way that to my brain is not too like masturbatory meta to be able to actually follow, which is sometimes an issue for me with a lot of like intentionally kind of self-referential work, I guess. I think that Emily Costa's writing is just like, it feels like being punched in the stomach. It's like so direct and so brutal, but sweet at the same time. And this book is, yeah, really, really excellent. Can't recommend it enough. And also her book of stories, Girl on Girl, is, I find them both, they're very different works, but her voice is just a real fucking pleasure to like go through and read and walk through, I find, at least. So yeah, big
Yeah,
fan
and
of her.
do you remember how you discovered that book?
Yes. I will also shout out Tucker Lady Phillips, or Lady Phillips. I actually forget how to say that first half of his name, unfortunately, who was a writer I met when I was doing the hard times of satire writing and stuff. And then found out that he was also kind of doing other types of writing like I was, and he led a workshop in 2020 or 2021, I think, that I honestly don't even remember. I think it was like short, kind of surreal, generative writing prompts. And I met Emily Costa in that writing workshop. And so I got to like see it. I saw her writing firsthand and was really excited by it. And then after that was done, Tucker contacted me and said, I just think you and Emily should be friends. And so he put us in contact. And yeah, I fell in love with her through her writing, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome to get that connection. Yeah. Or do you find, because every time I talk to you, I'm always in awe of how much you're working on and getting done on every front as a writer, as a musician. Where does the reading slip in? Does it tend to align with where your mind is at the moment, or is it all over the map? Or
Ooh, yeah. No, the reading does not slip in as often as I want it to. And it depends kind of what I'm reading. So there are some books that I keep by my bedside that has to be something I'm going through slowly for pleasure, and not necessarily I mean, all of it is for pleasure, but I would say a lot of books that I choose to read, I am like intentionally consuming because I want their influence on me to happen, because I'm as you said, usually in process of creating some kind of, or three different kind of projects at a time, or whatever they are. So there's a lot that I like, I see it as consuming. Like I consume it on purpose because I'm like, this is a writer whose voice I want to affect me, or I want this writer's use of imagery to impact what I'm doing. Or even just, I heard this person write some fucked up shit. I'd like to see what that's about and see how it affects me as a person. What are the emotional textures that I might not be able to like, or think of accessing on my own in my own writing. And then, so there's I think of myself, I'm pretty selective, I think, with what I read in either case. But like books that I read for pleasure and can take my time on, go by my nightstand. Books that I'm intentionally like need to work on this because it's part of my process, live on my desk. And when I find time is like I said, the nightstand is like 30 minutes before bed, and then I pass out. One of my favorite, this leads me actually to my next book that I will talk about, actually. This is one that reading for pleasure is something that I used to do all the time, but also weirdly kind of get punished for as a kid, because I don't think anybody knew that I had ADHD or whatever. I would sit down and read a book in like an hour, but like not do anything else. And sometimes like my mom would get upset with me. She'd be like, I just bought you this book and it didn't last you long enough to keep you entertained. So over the summer, one of the nicest days I can remember having in a long time happened over the summer, and it was a day where I decided to not take any of my Adderall. And I just read this book cover to cover, The House Next Door by Anne Rivers Siddons, from like 9 a.m. that morning to 9 a.m. the next day. I did nothing else but read the book. I only existed in the book. And I have to not take my drugs in order to do that. So that was really, really awesome. I was like choosing to give myself time to nothing but this book. And this is a book that I wanted for the influence on a horror novel that I'm writing. And a good friend of mine and colleague who I also teach with, Molly Bauer, who's an art historian, and very, very well read, recommended this book to me. And I had heard of it before. I think Stephen King has written about this novel in the past as an exemplary like horror novel. And I think that it was written in the late 70s, and it takes place in sort of like this is like a wealthy white southern suburb. I want to say it's in a suburb of DC, but I could be wrong. And even given that, I felt that a lot of the themes and sort of perspectives that the narrator especially shares felt really relevant to today. It is told in the first person perspective. And so one of the things I love about it, because it's about a couple living in this really nice neighborhood, and there's an empty lot next to their house, and then a house gets built on the empty lot. And so I feel like one way to read the novel is that it's like this homeowner horror story where their perfect privatized paradise is being infringed upon by others. But there's also a really interesting framing of it. The beginning end of the novel is bookended with the narrator writing to People magazine or writing an explanatory note about why they sought to tell their story in People magazine, and sort of distancing herself from the tabloid element. Like, you wouldn't think we're the kind of people that would be written about in People magazine, but we needed to get this story out there. And so there's something about that felt to me almost kind of like foretelling about social media. There's like I'm seeking a media enhanced sort of audience, but I also need to be in charge of the telling myself. And I feel like that's like a prison to live that way. But anyway, the novel is really amazing because it's so thoroughly anchored in this one person's perspective. It's easy to read it as you can read through it and go, yes, all these supernatural things that the neighbor believes to be happening are happening. But it's very easy to read it and just say, no, this woman is in such denial, maybe even trying to sell that it's supernatural and it isn't. And I don't want to I'm not really being specific or going into many plot details, but because I don't want to spoil it. But I love it too for the structure. It's 3 different parts, and each part is about a different family who moves into this new house next door and the tragedies that befall them that may or may not be supernatural in origin, or may just be this homeowner wanting her nice space back. So yeah,
People magazine, are we talking, was it published in like the 90s or
late 70s?
Late 70s. Whoa,
that's what I'm saying.
Dang.
Let me give you the exact year. 78.
Okay.
Opening sentence of the prologue: people like us don't appear in People magazine. We're
Dang.
not rich or about to be rich enough. We're not young in life and up and coming. But she's being very like coy. They live in a really nice neighborhood, like I said. So there's so much about it that I think it also sort of does kind of a next door style neighbors paranoia in the rich gated community. That's horror to me. That would be horrifying to be in a place like that. So
yeah, domestic Americana is horrific.
100%. That's a great way of describing this book, actually.
Well, and also how cool that without taking your medication, if all you had to do was read a book, the book would be medication.
Oh my God, Josh. Yes. Actually, my experience of reading this book is something I talk about with my therapist pretty regularly.
In what regard?
Oh, he's just like, what if you didn't have to punish yourself to get things done? Or, why does it feel like a guilty pleasure that you have to steal time to do this? And I'm just like, you can't ask me questions like that.
Oh my God.
I'll cry.
And so you always harken back to this experience of reading this book solely, singularly, and significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm with you. People could tell me you don't have to be productive to feel your self-worth or whatever. And I can't hear that enough, because it doesn't matter. It goes in one ear and out the other. And I did so much stuff the last couple of weeks on a personal level, on a relationship level, all of it. And yesterday was just so upset that I wasn't getting enough done. And I'm like, what is the enough part? Like, when have I ever gotten anything done that felt like I got
It'll
something done?
never be enough. And that, oh God, that's like something I'm also very trapped by, and also really, really resentful toward, and try to rebel against. And like, the thing I would love to do most in the world is do nothing. Like literally
Yes.
sit down all day and read a book. I'm very angry that as a creature made of the same ingredients as all of the other things on this planet that don't have to work, that I actually have to fucking work or
Yes.
think. No, that's a lie. I mean, reading is like thinking, right? It's how you develop, so many important parts of your ability to like interact with the world and put yourself into the world. But yeah, I like being non-productive is something I feel like I'm trying to like really protect and make time for.
Nurture. Yeah, I know. Make time for it. Well, it's so funny. Well, I was saying it in my poetry workshop that wasting time is good for poetry. But then
Ooh.
that kind of sets a trap that it's like, oh, okay, so are you wasting time knowing that you're marinating your productivity? But to me, I think I then thought further about it. And time, as we know it, as we discuss it, it's a work clock. Like we have the work clock. That's why we're aware of time. Time has all these abstract, cool things you could talk about with your friends around a campfire. But the time that we're generally speaking of is a work clock, and the time between that work clock and away from that work clock. And so, yeah, to waste it is an act of rebellion against that work clock.
Yes.
But easier said than done. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
Mm.
Even we're on a clock right now too.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I love
yeah.
your first two choices. Very different. I also, I need to tell you, you sent me your book a few days ago, and in between all the other things I've had to read, I read the first few stories. I love it.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
thank you. I was not
Yeah.
expecting that at all. I was like, yeah, I'll send it to you, but we're talking in like 5 days. So.
I know. But I really got to it, and like the Hawaiian Tropic story was incredible. It was all, the story about Michael was great. Yeah, so like I said, I read the first three, and yeah, I'm a fan of your writing, and you touch on things that are really human. I guess you would call them forbidden zones, but I don't think they're only forbidden because we don't live in a world where people are honest. And yeah, I thought your stuff about childhood was incredibly accurate, and although specific to your own experience. But yeah.
Thank you so much. That means
Yeah.
that's so exciting for me. Yeah, because we know each other from from back in the old Twitter days. I know that I actually was checking my email today for the link, and I'm like, here's like the 3 emails I've ever exchanged with Josh, and then one's from like years ago because we exchanged essays. You sent me one that was about your dad's girlfriend.
Yeah.
And
yours was about your brother, and we did that that was probably 5 years ago, and we got to it. It took a while, I remember, for us to get to each other's essays, but yeah, it was really cool. And honestly, yeah, I don't do that often, like trade work with other writers, so it was really I was honored that we did.
Yeah, me too. And there's something like, I mean, obviously, hopefully it came through in how I talk about Emily, but like this is something I probably learned when I was younger as a teenager playing music. But even then, there's a different sort of energy when you're exchanging music with people than when you're exchanging writing with people. I don't really feel like getting into it. You just have to believe me that it's true. But I think it's very, very intimate and vulnerable to give your guts to somebody else and ask for their guts like that, basically.
And there's also some labor to it, Listening to a song is easy.
Yeah.
Reading, like we just discussed all the things we're up against when it comes to sitting our butts down to read. It's like just that alone, there's effort involved in that.
Yeah. And this is something I wrote about it a little bit in the book, but that I try to talk about and think about all the time too, that paying attention and noticing to something like that, and choosing to me is basically an act of love. Or I think that love, what we call love or identify as like romantic love, is also like an extension of this basic act of noticing, and then to like transmute what it is you've noticed through your experience and mind and brain and all of that, and then respond to it is very, very intimate, I think. And just has been a really important thing in my life. I also, some of what's been stressing me with some of the publication stuff is like, I want like real criticism. I don't want people to just be nice to me. And it's not like I guess I am accusing like so many people who are critics of just being nice to each other or for each other's books. And it's not that I am confident that that's entirely what's happening or the full story. And also, of course, I want people to like what I wrote and all that. But like, I don't think it's possible to like everybody as a person. And I think that it's probably, I'm not like new or genius for observing that social media over the last decade or two has like kind of flattened the distinction between like what you make and put out in the world and who you are. Because you have to flatten it into like one thing per platform or whatever the case is, even if you are consciously not trying to, how it is presented, medium is message, et cetera, like how it still has that effect. So I think about that a lot, and I'm really self-conscious of that, getting ready to promote my book and asking people to read it. And I guess that like one way I get to sit on my high horse and rest on my laurels is knowing that I have a lot of the friendships I've made throughout my life since I was a teenager and the ones that I still have today have all come to me through artistic collaboration and sharing and exchange. I'm really fortunate. I count this as something I'm lucky for every single day. Even like who I am married to is somebody I would not have known had I not chosen to start playing music and performing when I was 15. The networks that happen. The reason I know about Santa Cruz and like spent time in Santa Cruz when I was young is because I was playing music and crashing with friends who lived there who kept booking me to come play at their little co-ops and stuff. I say little co-ops kind of disparagingly. I take that back.
Little meaning like young and naive.
Yeah, really young. We were like 20. And I actually, I'm really grateful, side note, that I got to be really reckless and party and drink till I was blacked out and do all sorts of questionable things with questionable strangers in these houses because it felt like I'm 20 years old and it's the year 2010 and you walk into this house and like the first thing you see is a list of everybody's pronouns who lives there and like rules for protecting yourselves from the cops and like all sorts of stuff. And like everybody is an artist and experimenting with different things. And yeah, a lot of them are also like your classic, like it's because it's a UC Santa Cruz sort of community. There's a lot of like quietly rich kids kind of masquerading or just experimenting with being punk before they're going to go work for their dad's bank in like 3 more years or whatever the case might be. Dad's bank is such a like 80s way of giving that example actually, but you know
I
what
was
I mean?
saying that to my wife yesterday. It's like you never realize that some of these people you were being carelessly youthful with actually had a backup plan.
Yeah.
They had a fallback.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
Oh, I didn't realize you had a fallback. I thought we were all just like throwing ourselves into the
That's
into
so
the
funny.
flames.
And so true. Yeah. And there is one short essay in there that is kind of about that, actually. I just realized in the book. But anyway, speaking of the Bay Area, Comet Bus number, which one is this? Number 57. Aaron Comet Bus was is really prolific zine punk writer, creator, documenter, chronicler of Bay Area punk scenes. I want to say late 80s, early 90s. I'm sure plenty. I don't know if your listeners include a lot of like middle-aged men from California who would correct me, but I grew up in the Bay Area and so was pretty aware of, like I go through by age 14, you should have worn an Operation Ivy t-shirt once to school or something like that. Like there's I'm really proud of a lot of the Bay Area, like music that I was able to kind of grow up in the shadow of. But also I was too young for like, talking about Grimple and Flipper and shit like that. But it was really influential for me. And so Aaron Comet Bus, there's a few different, Comet Bus is the series of zines and sort of, stories that he tells and documents. There's also a short novel he wrote that I really like that I almost brought. It's called I Wish There Was Something That I Could Quit. There's a lot of different material to comb through if you are curious about Aaron Comet Bus as a writer. But why I picked this one in particular, number 57, is this one is all interviews with cartoonists. And I read this on a plane this summer somewhere. I don't remember. Maybe even earlier than that. Very short read, easy to go through because it's many interviews. But I actually think something about reading interviews is a little more dense because it's the substance of a conversation and none of the like lubricant of other writing and prose to guide you through it. And it struck me that this is one of those books where I'm like, okay, anybody who is an artist of any kind, regardless of medium, needs to read it. The insights are incredible because the variety of cartoonists interviewed in it. There are people from all different eras, places, points in their careers. I wanted to find a table of contents, but there is none. That's so punk rock. I remember when I was a teenager too, I just want to show you one of the things that immediately made me want to start reading these Comet bus zines when I was like finding them in comic shops and stuff was that a lot of them are handwritten. And I just think that his like reading the handwriting like that was really fucking appealing to me as a youngster. Who we got interviewed in here? Gabrielle Bell, Robin Enrico, Jeffrey Lewis. I thought maybe Gary Panter was in here, but I'm probably wrong. Julia Wirtz. Yeah, Gary Panter. The Gary Panter interview was great. Anyway, so I just something about like reading a handful of, not more than a handful of conversations with, artists on art is always interesting. But I think cartoonists in particular, as a variety of artists, are people that I've been interested in since I was a kid. And yeah, so highly recommend that to anybody who like is involved in art in whatever way, because there's a lot in there about like endurance and resilience. There's people who have been at this for like 40 years.
What do you think your early intrigue to cartoonist was based on? What feelings were there with that?
That's really, I've never thought about that. I got really into comics when I was in high school. And so actually one of the books I wanted to show you is a comic series I loved when I was a teenager. I know that was part of it. And I mean, I think that I don't know if it is any more intelligent or complex than like as a kid I loved cartoons. Also in the early 90s was a really, really good time for animation.
Yeah, it was
just incredible. And so that must have been part of it for me. I was always, when I was a really young kid, the first thing I was conscious of wanting to be was an artist, but specifically I was drawing all the time as a kid. And that was the number one thing. Until I was a teenager, it was always visual art. And even into high school, I was like, I'm going to be a comic artist. I always caught almost there and then can't finish it. Which is actually maybe another way of looking at just a really long drawn out process. And maybe I'll finally finish the comic when I'm like 50 and that'll be great.
Yeah.
But animation and like puppetry to me are like as close as we probably can come to what it is when we imagine, like, I feel like there is, writing I obviously think is like is transformative and magic in a different way, but it's a little more, it's maybe more indirect. There, like the transmutation happens on the page and involves a couple different people with like visual sort of storytelling or art that requires this level of collaboration and of different hands going into it. I feel like I'm rambling. I think because I'm realizing as I try to describe one thing I like about cartoonists or cartooning or comics is that I also like those things about every other art that I've ever practiced. They're all
So
collaborative.
You like art.
I just like art.
Yeah, it's a weird thing though. Sometimes if I can't write, I'll doodle, and then I'll be able to write to accompany those doodles. And yeah, they're feeding down the same channels, but they're different, and they aid and assist one another. And yeah, it's pretty fundamental. It's memes, it's cave paintings. And does that guy self-publish all of his books?
I really should have like prepared for this
by
it's finding out more.
I didn't know if it was like that DIY, like they're like
I'm
zines.
Gonna go out on a limb and say certainly most of the actual Comet Bus zines are probably self-published.
Yeah.
This is self-published. I want to say that one novella I mentioned maybe had another independent publisher. I wish there was something I could quit. Maybe I'll look it up.
Also, that D.T. Robbins, his press. We had Lexi Kent Monning on. The Burden of Joy, which he published. Yeah, and I love that book.
Lexi Kent Monning's incredible. I got to see her read a couple times in LA this spring, and I could listen to and watch her like endlessly. And I think I mentioned like attention is difficult for me. So
yeah,
I just was double checking on the Aaron Comet Bus stuff. But yeah, Last Gasp is who put out the novella, but it appears to me that these are all self-published. And I don't think he's been in the Bay Area for a long time. But what I am talking about was a time period, like late 80s, early 90s, Bay Area.
right.
Documenting punk life, etc. D.T. Robbins puts out really, really fucking good books.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess speaking of cartoons and cartoonism.
Yeah, what else do you got?
The comics I mentioned from high school. So I'm actually really sad because I used to have this series collected in individual issues, and I gave them to someone to borrow when I was like in my late teens and have not gotten them back yet. And I think they're out of print. But I was able to find a collection later. And this is a short series of comics called Popgun War that was put out by, I don't know how to say his name actually, Ferrel Dalrimple. And when I was in high school, and I was a freshman in high school, the high school was right next door to a comic shop where I would go. This like totally sleazy older guy worked there who was involved in like local music and stuff. And we would go there and just flip through things. It was the early 2000s, so I was like reading Johnny the Homicidal Maniac comics and stuff. And I found this, and the first one of these comics, there's only, I want to say like 5 that he made. Yeah, maybe even 4 in here. They're pretty surreal. As a teenager, I think that I wasn't necessarily trying to get deep. I wanted to see something that looked cool. The lead character being a boy who is flying around with wings was really interesting to me. There's like a giant talking fish in here.
What's the title again?
Popgun War.
Popgun War.
And this was collected by Dark Horse Comics. This one I'm looking at in 2003. And they were originally published between 2000 and 2003. Yeah, I remember just being really struck. I liked the art a lot, which is the first thing. I think the first page is what made me buy it as a little, like, budding goth wannabe punk teenager. This dude walking around with tattoos who has a bunch of wings, and then, like, they burn off, or he cuts them off in the opening pages, and the little boy finds them and puts them on, basically. They're just like a series of what I would call, what are just surrealist encounters. I was so captivated by the art.
I mean, a comic book store right next to a high school feels like it should either be illegal or it's an op. Like
right.
It's an entrapment.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what else would have been in that strip mall because it was right across the street from the high school. I know that there was a donut shop next door to the comics because we'd go over there in the morning, get hot chocolate, and like pour booze into it and stuff.
Dang.
And then I want to say there was a yoga studio in that same strip mall that I went to as a youngster before culty yoga studios really took off. This was like a small room with shitty carpet and one really, really, really old, like, Malaysian woman who Malaysian American. She'd been living in the US like her entire life, but like, and it was pretty rad.
Yeah, they had it all.
And then I'm sure there must have been an army recruitment center in there too, but I just don't remember.
I knew it was too good to be true.
I lived near Travis Air Force Base. I was in Vacaville, California, home of Papa Roach.
Okay. Oh, nice. All right. Significant. So that's how they get you into the Army Recruitment Center. They sprinkle a little yoga, some donuts, comic books, and why don't you stop on over here and see how many pull-ups you can do and sign this piece of paper if you want to get a Camaro.
Just fun teenage things. Yeah.
Fun teenage things. Got it.
And then I'll quickly, this is a more recent, I probably read this 5 years ago, a comic artist, writer, cartoonist named Caroline Cash. This is an early collection called Girl in the World. I will also shout out my friend Mark Bouchard, who is a writer of horror comics, former Hard Times BFF, well, current BFF. And so Mark sent me this comic for Christmas back in like 2020, I think. And one thing that I'm remembering too about that time, and that was nice also, I'll say this about like having a network of people, a community of people that you discover through art, is like you've got people whose couches you can crash on across the country, which is great. But Mark Bouchard and we started talking during the pandemic. I was in the wedding party for Mark's wedding over the summer, and I joked when I made the speech during the wedding that like this is our third time hanging out in person ever. But we just like constantly, we've had a group chat with another former Hard Times writer also named Mark that's been going strong for like 5-6 years now. And so they sent me, we've continued sending each other things. It's just nice. And so Caroline Cash has won an Eisner or several probably for her series called Pee Pee Poo Poo Comics, which I can't recommend enough. And also is I think the current Nancy artist, which is really fucking exciting for the Nancy comics, which have been running forever. I don't know, Ernie Bushmiller's Nancy comics. So this is an early collection of hers that I don't know if it's still in print. I brought it to get signed by her when she was in Seattle for Short Run Comics Festival a couple years ago. Also shout out Short Run Comics Festival, which is a really, really cool event.
There's a connect between the punk scene and comic scene, right? Like Chris Estrada, who I think he was on the show a long time ago now, and he brought in graphic novels, and he's a
Love and
punk.
Rockets guy. Yeah.
Is that a classic connection there, or is this coincidence?
I think it's a classic connection. I think that the connection, because when you look at like fanzines and even just the imagery of punk rock or of any, like the imagery that defines any kind of musical subscene is made up of the people who are involved in that music otherwise, right? Or people who like it. So I think by extension, it's pretty normal to see those connections. And cool. I'm sure there's a lot more interesting reasons. I just know that, that makes sense to me.
And, you talking about the network you've made through art in all of these music and literature and all these directions. It's like, it reminds me of this tweet I saw this week that was like, the true measure of wealth isn't how much money you have, it's how many couches you'd be allowed to sleep on if things went bad. Yeah, and I just like, that's it for me right there.
Exactly.
So all these different ways to do that, there are people you clearly have connected with, and that's actually the most important part.
Can I get more? How many more books can I fit in?
How many you got? Yeah.
Okay, one more from, I'll try to go quick. Yeah. This is one that was another huge influence on me from high school. And again, speaking of being a nerd, I read a lot of web comics in the early 2000s and was really into Joey Comeau, who did a comic called A Softer World that wasn't necessarily like funny. I really liked that it was like collage almost. It was a comic that the panels were made up of photographs and that were sort of just overlaid with text, and it felt more like visual poetry sometimes. Joey Comeau has just been like a hugely influential writer on me since I can remember. I think this is the first, because I discovered the comics first and then discovered like internet writing because of him. I think this is the first like independent writer. It was like the year 2005 or 2006 or something. And I was just on the internet a lot. And like, especially because I had one class that was like what was it? It was like independent study with the art teacher, but he just like let me use his office and fuck around and like look at webcomics all day, basically, is what I did. So, Joey Comeau, I discovered his short stories and was really blown away by his voice. And so this book is a out of print collection that I will hope to protect and maintain till I die. It's called It's Too Late to Say I'm Sorry. And some of these stories I think you can still find for free on the internet. There's a horror story in here called 1 Foot Underwater that I think is basically a perfect fucking story. It's about a girl whose little brother drowns in a pond on their property, and then something starts to come back out of the water. Is basically how I would describe it. There are so many incredible stories in here, and something I think about a lot is like, okay, especially as someone who's like middle-aged and fucking hates trying to think about new music. I think a lot about, why is it the best music I ever heard was when I was 13 because I had only heard like 10 bands up to that point or whatever, I do think that that's something I kind of go back and forth on, but I try not to obsess over or overanalyze. And like, so sometimes I think, well, maybe like Joey Comeau's writing is still some of my favorite writing. But I come back to it still regularly and feel the same way. So I wrote about him a little bit in the last essay that's in my book collection. And yeah, I love his voice. People should read him. He's got a short novel called Malagash that's really cool. He has this really elegant way of blending like sci-fi or surreal and sometimes horror elements, but into these stories that are still, they have some of the same like painfully close-up intimacy that I think Emily Costa is so good at getting. There are like one of the stories I remember reading, I have another book of his stories that's a collection of dirty stories he wrote called The Girl Who Couldn't Come. And I remember reading some of these online when I was a teenager and feeling like, whoa, I found like something really radical and exciting and different. And it was like, there's a story in there about the protagonist has sex with a woman and then like they're like watching each other masturbate, and then she accidentally makes him like come in his own eye and it like burns, and it's so funny and they fall apart. And I remember reading that even as a teenager who was like, you know, having sex and stuff, which was another weird element. Actually, the high school I went to after I switched schools before my freshman year was done, because I was flunking out at the high school where I was going to buy comics all day instead of going to school. And
Too many comics.
yeah. And so I went to this other school that was like a charter school that was being closet run by the local megachurch and only had like 400 students and like 80 in my graduating class. And the social hierarchy was so fucked there. It was like the really good Christian kids were kind of running things, and then the handful of goth fuck ups and punk fuck ups were like all banding together. And so there was a really weird thing where, because the school was so small and so Christian, basically everybody knew that me and my boyfriend were having sex. Like we were the two people having sex at the high school. And so there was a weird, like, it's like a, you know, this intimate thing that also, without even like social media or anything, felt like it was being like performed for other people sometimes, which was really bizarre, and uncomfortable a lot. Anyway, that story felt really relatable to me. And I remember it being so young, but also thinking like, you know, like I'm brand new at sex and already I feel like I understand that it's weirdly humiliating and in a funny way, and can be tender and confusing. And, you know, in addition to totally rad. But yeah, so anyway, I think that, yeah.
It was
Joey
really
Comeau,
the golden age of internet back then, because we still had, I don't want to say attention spans, but we still had an interest in the longer form things, and people found a place to put theirs. And there was something really captivating about it at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm so grateful for that early internet period. Honestly. Yeah, heavily impacted me. And let's see. Okay. This book, Still Alive by L.J. Pemberton. I can't remember anymore when I definitely read it last year, maybe even, no, yeah, it came out in 2024. So I read it last year. And this is a book that feels, I don't know, sometimes I catch myself feeling like I relate to too many things, and then I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm being narcissistic by saying that everything is about me all the time? Because it starts to feel like beyond coincidence. And I remember reading this book. One of the things that always catches me like that is if you're reading a book and you're like, oh, they're talking about places where I've lived. Like that's one way that I'm always like, I think the knee-jerk reaction is like, you didn't live there, I lived there. But then, you know, then you're like, wait, no, that's just what familiarity and recognizing and relating to someone else looks like, you know, or feels like, I think. And so I'm really drawn to and excited by and absorbed by books that talk about cities and places where I've lived, you know, and or spent significant time in. And this book, you know, covers some places that have been important to me. And like so realistically, I'm pretty dumb. Like I'll forget. I'll be like, yes, I'm reading a novel where this character spends some time in Portland, and then I contacted L.J. Pemberton, the writer, earlier this year, and was like, I'm getting ready for a book tour, and I'm going to hit Portland. Are you there? And I think she's like, I haven't lived there since 2008 or something like that. And I'm like, oh shit, right? And that was a character in a book that you wrote, also. So I want to read the opening sentence of this book too. Should I do the opening sentence? I shouldn't.
Why not?
Well, because it makes me want to keep going. We were all inside the house is the opening sentence. Something happens here. There's like, this story is framed. And so one thing I also have always been really drawn to and tried to do in my writing and really drawn to in other people's writing is like a nonlinear story time, or like needing, reflecting back, the story. I don't think I can enjoy it at its best if it's a linear plot. I enjoy stories where you, the person reading it, are kind of creating the meaning for in place of plot as you go, because there is a conversation happening between events or between moments in a person or character's life or whatever. And so this one does that, I think, in a really satisfying, sometimes soothing way, because there are moments that just become like unbearable with emotional tension in a current moment, and then we can like I'll almost get the relief of stepping back when the narrator reflects on, again, this kind of traumatic, fucked up, there's a couple of fucked up things that happen in like the early life of the narrator. The opening chapter is about a car crash happening like on the family's front lawn, and the narrator is like a child and sees like a dead body. And and the childhood memories that are returned to in the narrative are usually ones of like discord in the family or something bad is happening. But I think that one reason that felt so effective and relatable to me, at least, is because it feels realistic and relatable. I think when we are going through in our lives moments of distress or turmoil, I think it makes sense to reflect back. We want to find a reason or want to find the origin of the pattern or whatever it is. And reading someone else, like reading an externalized version of that, I think is really, really illuminating. I think that we all like to think, at least I do like to think, that I'm aware enough. And I know that all the processing, I can do all the processing and thinking and contemplating I want in here all day, but it's just spinning wheels. Like what actually changes things and life and experience is like what you're doing in life, like the actions you take or where you are and things like that. And so I do think that there's something just really, really innately engaging about reading a book that sort of uses that same process to explore the events that are happening, basically. Just really incredible. Also, this publisher, Malarkey Books, another one that I can only say really, really fucking good things about. Alan Good works so hard. I don't know how he does it. The volume of work and the quality of work that they put out with this press. And so, yeah, L.J. Pemberton, still alive. Everybody should read this book. It's devastating in a really, really good way.
Yeah, getting struck by those external works or influences or behavior. You were saying that life is what you're doing, but also, yeah, what we get struck by. My last guest, Larry Charles, he brought up this book called Service, which is written...
John Tottenham.
Yeah, okay, so you know it.
I have not read it. I want to so bad, though. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I just read it based off his recommendation, and speaking to your point, it's about this grumpy bookstore guy who he was at Stories Books in Echo Park from 2016 to 2019, which is like, dude, I lived across the street from there. And I saw him perched up at the bookseller's perch in Stories, which is almost like, it looks like an elevated, like a judge is sitting up there.
Wow.
And it was so interesting because I was like, oh yeah, the grumpiness I was perceiving from you was true. You were thinking all those things that I was afraid you were thinking. But to your point about how places you've been, it's like, it was surreal reading it because, yeah, it was like, I was there, man. But also, it was also just so helpful. It was that external, someone else was confirming reality. And you were saying that love is about the things we notice, and also sort of clarity about the time we've been passing through. That's also what's so great about people speaking to where they're at, because it gives the rest of us clarity too. We're like, okay, yeah, you confirm that, and people were behaving this way, and really captured a time, and I was really grateful for it.
Hell yeah. Also, I think your friend Tim is in that book.
Yeah, he posted about that. Yeah, that's so funny. And so, yeah, and Tim I met, digging at used book sales at libraries too, and becoming friends there. And so it's like, yeah, all those cross patterns. I don't know, that book is so singular in its subject matter. It's just a guy who feels himself losing time working at this weird bookstore and wanting to write a novel. And yet, through that simplicity, there's so much relatability. I don't know. It's really inspiring.
Also, shout out to Tim and Reverie Books, because I did a reading there in March that was like, I set it up and it was my first time setting up a reading. It wasn't. I forgot that when I was in grad school, I set up a bunch because it was my job. It was the first time I did one that I wanted to. And yeah, it went so well. I felt so like comfortable in there. Everybody loved the space. I found some really fucking rad books. The thing I love so much about that store is, and I told this to Tim, like, I've never been in a used bookstore like that felt like I can see literally Tim's hand on every single book in the room.
So true. So true. He has such particular and great taste on books.
And I think to me, what's so mind-blowing about that is I'd never met him before. So really what I'm seeing is the externalization of him, right? Like when I'm looking at the books, I'm putting together a picture that tells me about him. But like, which I think also speaks so well of the amount of himself that literally goes into this place.
Yeah, his books are like more beautiful than other people's books. He picks like these books with these amazing covers that, published in the 70s, 80s, whenever they are, even new ones. And you're just like, how did you find another beautiful, aesthetically looking beautiful book that also the subject matter is totally in alignment with everything else in the store? Yeah, he has great taste. And yeah, I did my poetry performance down there and it was so fun and so charged. And it was extra cool because I met my wife at the restaurant next door. We worked there.
Really?
Yeah. And so it was all these years later, kind of going back there and doing this performance it was really significant. It's not the same restaurant anymore, but yeah, same space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great segue. Else? Yeah, I'm going to be quick because these are the two books I'm not done reading yet. But speaking of beautiful looking books, I wanted to also talk about Double Black Diamond by Miles Klee and Mads Gobbo and Miles Klee.
Oh yeah. Miles has been on this show.
For real?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm I guess internet friends with Miles like anybody from Twitter back in the day. And went to the book release for this at Stories a few months ago. The publisher Double Negative Books are putting out really beautiful, like exquisitely beautiful and fucking weird, for my dumb guy way of describing them, books. They are, my book that I am getting ready to put out is very much in conversation with lots and lots and lots of types of books that are coming out in indie lit over the last couple of years. I think that people will, depending on who puts it into conversation with whatever, it all depends on the person reading it or whatever. But like, I get a sense sometimes of feeling, and this is actually a really unfortunate side effect of the way that I consume and all of us consume media, is that I do draw pretty quick conclusions about things based on like this person as a writer has, concocted a brand for themselves. And so here's what the book is. Right. And I guess on the one hand, if I'm making assumptions like that, then that just means the marketing is working and that's correct. But I guess that I am suspicious of myself when I find myself responding to marketing like that. And so I try to be pretty selective about even the books that I think are like in conversation with what I'm doing. Like I want to know, I try to tell the college where I teach is an art school. So, we're constantly having conversations, even though it's just in our writing classes, about like how do these same principles operate in the other artistic sort of worlds or scenes or genres or practices. And one thing that I'm really feel grateful that I get to soothe my young frightened students about sometimes, that because I remember being a young frightened artist, is when I was younger, I would think, oh, somebody else is doing something similar to me. That means I can't do it because it's already been done. And thankfully I got older and realized like, actually, it's really fucking exciting when you find someone who's doing something that you want to do, because it means A, that there's someone else who can understand. And B, it means there's probably an audience for the thing that you're both doing. And if you are feeling compelled to contribute to that conversation and expand it even more, then that is an impulse we should like learn to recognize as a good thing, and not like fear or suppress. But so even with that, though, I try to be kind of guarded or selective about what I want influencing me. And so my impression so far from what I've read of and Nick Greer's the publisher of these books and what he has shared with me, these are books that I think are and they're all very different so far, the books they've put out. And this is the second one that they put out, Double Black Diamond. So it's a collection of short stories that were collaboratively written, which I think is really, really fucking cool. Very excited by collaborative writing. I want to destroy, all sense of ego, hopefully, before I die. And so I think that writing, especially writing, I think, I feel the ugly siren call that's like, I'm the individual person, read my story. And I'm pretty conscious when I write and create that that's not really what I'm trying to do. The story I'm trying to make is going to be something that I'm fundamentally incapable of controlling because it won't exist till somebody else like reads it and interacts with it. So any kind of work that's like engaged with erasure of self and individuality, I'm like so horny about. And this book is like a really, really fucking exciting demonstration of that, I think. The stories are very fucking, I hate to use the word surreal. Again, I'm kind of a dumb guy. I don't talk about books a lot. I just read them, but they are frightening and bizarre, and also feature illustrations by Mads, which are really, really beautiful to look at and equally like spiky and unusual and a little off-putting in exactly the way that the text really wants. And yeah, I just think that it's very exciting that it was written collaboratively, and the book looks incredible too. So you were talking about beautiful books from, Tim at Reverie.
That's rad.
Yeah.
Man.
So I'm only a few stories in. I just read one that stood out. And this one, speaking of methods, I was trying to only read on the bus, except that I get really, really motion sick when I read in cars, and I can't read more than a few pages at a time. But I also think that kind of fits how some of these stories want me to feel.
Chipping away at them.
Yeah. And then the last thing I'll quickly talk about, I found at a local vintage and thrift kind of shop in the neighborhood where I used to live in here in Seattle. And actually, I just learned this book, I think, either has a more recent edition or is about to. This book, Lulu in Hollywood by Louise. It's a collection of essays by Louise Brooks, who was an early Hollywood starlet, sort of responsible for the flapper hairstyle popularity. She was a dancer in the US and then first achieved kind of film fame doing like avant-garde erotic sort of German cinema in her youth, and then did silent films in the US. Ended up having kind of a difficult life after that. Was not really able to find success with talkies and worked as an escort for a little while, and then was still, this is a concept I'm so fascinated by. People who are more engaged and informed, like historians of sex work, could definitely speak to this way better than I can, but I'm really interested in the idea that the phrase being like kept, like it's not really that you're not necessarily being expected to perform or spend time, but someone is paying for you to live, basically.
Yeah.
She maintained until she died. I was reading that there were men she knew who were just like supporting her financially, and I guess I'm fascinated by that idea because there's a childhood part of me that goes, that's the dream, because I don't want to work. I want to not take drugs and read books all day. So if someone else takes care of me in that way, that fucking rules. And then of course also knowing now as an older person that needing to be the need to be financially independent, which I also am suspicious of. As a side note, also having grown up with an immigrant dad, I feel really duped that I got swallowed by the American culture myth that's you're 18, you better get out of the house and get your own place right away.
Yeah.
Because so many of my friends I know who also have immigrant parents are that's bullshit. Stay home and save money for a few years. I think my dad lived with his mom till he knocked up my mom on accident and had to move countries to raise me. But yeah, so I just think maybe there's I just meandered in a totally different direction. Why I love these essays is she wrote essays about her experience in Hollywood. I think mostly later in her life. Kind of wrote film criticism and essays on what it was like in Hollywood and what the movies are like even contemporaneously to when she's writing. And I'm so angry. This is a feeling I get a lot. when I discover a woman artist who I feel like I should have been broadly exposed to, like Tina Bell of the band Bam Bam from Seattle, I will hope that people look her up and listen to Bam Bam, because she was like a pioneer of grunge before, like way before the names that you associated with. Not way before, but enough before that she did not get her credit and it's difficult to ignore that she's a Black woman who didn't receive the credit that white musicians and contemporaries of hers were getting. And her music was so exciting. And so I felt the same way when I discovered Louise Brooks and started reading, because she is so fucking witty and insightful. And even, knowing that these essays were written as long ago as they were, like, I think most of them in probably the 50s and 60s, maybe. When did she die? She died in... Never mind. You don't need to know that. All you need to know is that she's like heartbreakingly insightful. And there was a sentence, I want to find one sentence from her first essay in here that made me just go like, yep, this is a person who I am furious I didn't know about. I needed to know about her sooner. In telling her own story too, she starts by describing the displacement and massacre of the indigenous people living in the state, where she's like, my parents were settlers, and this is still the first thing. She's like, homesteaders pour in after the Americans mass slaughtered all the buffalo. Like, she's framing the story that way on purpose, and describes herself as being raised. Her parents are basically artists. She's always got music and literature in the house, so she's growing up pretty independent. Here's the part that I wanted to read. She's talking about how, I must confess to a lifelong curse. Her lifelong curse is that she like has to speak her mind. And as also a person who has felt very, very hampered by the world's responses to what I am trying to say or do throughout my life, I really related to that. And she says her mother was trying to teach her to be less critical to people's faces as a kid, because she was very outspoken. And she says, I'd watch my mother, pretty and charming, as she laughed and made people feel clever and pleased with themselves, but I could not act that way. And so I have remained in cruel pursuit of truth and excellence, an inhumane executioner of the bogus, an abomination to all but those few who have overcome their aversion to truth in order to free whatever is good in them. Like, yeah, that's like the way that to me is like the thing I hope all people are seeking toward being in their lives, and that I certainly am. And so for her to just identify herself that way right off the bat, and reflecting on herself as a young woman, and very quickly encompassing, she has a brief moment where she talks about like an interaction she had with Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda Fitzgerald later in that same, or earlier in that same paragraph. And like, she's just, I've not been afraid to criticize people to their faces. And in her telling of her own story, she's basically saying like, here, and I was punished for it by Hollywood. But like, and not really by Hollywood, but by like, the men in charge. And so I'm really, really, really loving going through these essays, and I'm trying to go through them slowly on purpose because I don't want to finish it too fast.
Yeah, you found this kindred spirit, and a great reminder that the level of art and the scale in which you're allowed to do it and the time you're allowed to do it in the mainstream has nothing to do with the value that your art has for other people or for yourself. And yeah, there's all these voices, and it's cool when you can dig through and find the ones that really resonate, not the ones that were just placed in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Lulu's Hollywood, I gotta pick that up. Anyone who mentions the original curse of this country, they're truth seekers, and it's kind of what I'm obsessed with.
Yes.
Yeah, because they're not living in denial.
Yeah, and like I said, I think there's a more recent printing of this that I think has some updated stuff. I just was so struck. I saw the cover, and then I was like, you know what? I ran into this before on the internet, on some rabbit hole I went down. I came across Louise Brooks because I recognized the cover in the bookshop, or it wasn't even a bookshop. Like I said, it was the vintage thrift store. And it happened to be on top of a display in the window. Like I wouldn't have even... It's so hard to remember all the books that you want to remember when you're when you're staring at them in a bookstore or a vintage store or wherever you're hunting for them. It's so hard. I have all these lists, and even those don't really help. I find the best way to find books that I've been meaning to read is when they aren't organized. I love an unorganized bookshelf. Yeah,
at
totally.
a thrift store or whatever. It's easier.
That's how this felt. Yeah. Like I could have spent 5 more years knowing in the back of my mind, I need to find something by Louise Brooks, but like would not have known to look for it. But because it was, a striking
Fair.
image, because it's the image from a movie, a film she made called Pandora's Box, early in her career. And also the dimensions of this book are really interesting.
Yes.
This is another one I've taken out to read on the bus, but it is
it's
very, very
almost
large.
Square. It's a square book in the way the top margin cuts off just above where her bangs begin. Yeah, it's fascinating design choices.
It's an eye-catching.
Oh wow, those are some
read,
big pages to read.
They are. Lots of amazing photographs of her in here too. She's a little hottie, obviously. So yeah. Those are some things I have been thinking about.
Thank you.
Book-wise.
Yeah, I love the collection. I love all your contributions and thoughts about what you brought in and how they pertain to you and to everything else. And yeah, I'm so glad we got this chance to catch up in this.
Me too.
In this format, nonetheless.
Yeah. No, that's honestly, I think I even said, I was like, oh, good. I'll finally get like an hour plus to uninterrupted talk with Josh.
Yeah, I know. We haven't actually probably ever had that.
I mean, that is pretty much because when you come to hang out with me and Mary do a lot of the talking.
Yeah, I'm just along for the ride.
And you're like, let's go for a walk while you guys talk.
Oh, there's a party boat on the river.
Yeah.
That was
the
surreal.
Hot tub boats. Yeah.
Yeah, that was surreal. But yeah, I'm looking forward to all our future conversations too. And yeah, thanks for coming on and doing this. And congratulations on your new book. I can't wait to read the rest of it.
Thank you. I'm really excited to hear what you think.
Yeah, I will. But I might not be good because I'll just have encouraging things to say.
That's fine. Because I went on your podcast and talked about on the record how I don't want anyone to be nice to me. That means I can welcome all the nice things guilt-free now.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, okay. It was a tactic.
Distanced myself from it. And now I get to be like, but all my friends happen to say nice things about
Okay,
it.
fair enough. Yeah, you laid it out. You offered them an out clause, a different direction, but they knew they had it and they still chose.
There you go.
Yeah, that they liked it. Lauren Lavin, thank you so much. Appreciate having you on, and thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books, and happy reading out there.